I really think this is a game changer for the industry. And anyone who's even thinking about getting into stretcher, they need to come check this out.
Well, I need to ask you, are you applying for a sales job? Because it's starting to make...
Back to NEMT experts, I've got industry game changers with me. Ed Bandas is a national account executive for Broda, and Dave DeRoin is the vice president of sales. I'd love for you guys to give a quick background about yourselves and how you got to be at Broda.
Dave found me in a restaurant someplace and said, hey, why don't you come over and join us? No, we actually had some friends in common, and Broda was just such a tremendous reputation for quality and longevity in this industry, and it just became the standard in long-term care seating. So when Dave offered me the opportunity to join the team, how could I say no to this? This was a fantastic opportunity. So I've been... and I think we're trying to figure out, was I here 4 years or 5 years? I don't even remember now. It's just been a blur of fun and productivity, and it's been wonderful being here with Broda.
Nearly with the company for 15 years now. It doesn't seem like that, and especially when I'm only 29 years old. So it seems just a very short amount of time. Had the opportunity and was really blessed to be able to come work for such a great company that's been around now for 40+ years and doing high-level healthcare seating. As we like to tell all of our customers and anybody who will listen, we just happen to be the recipients and the caretakers right now. But there's been so many great people that have come before us to build the brand and to build a great product. We just hope that what we do for the future helps them as well. So excited to be here, have loved this company for 15 years. You know, when you work for a place for 15 years and it seems like 5, you know you're at the right spot.
Indeed.
Yeah.
I met you guys last year at the NEMT conference. The Bambi booth and the Broda booth were right next to each other. And at the time, you guys had just released this game-changing new Traversa chair, which Ed you're wearing the nice swag for. And I got to actually sit in a Traversa chair and have it go from stretcher to wheelchair and back. It was pretty incredible. This is going to be the focus of today's episode, because this Traversa chair by Broda, and I've been in this industry for 2 years now, like, this is one of the few moments where the industry hits a really game-changing point. Like, this is going to affect the entire industry. I think, Ed, you had told me at one point that 90% of stretcher trips in NEMT should not be stretcher trips. Is that right?
I shouldn't say should not be, but don't have to be stretcher trips. Oftentimes we find that gurneys are being used in particular because the patient can't tolerate just a standard wheelchair. Or we actually heard this from an EMT provider. They use a gurney because the patient didn't own their own wheelchair. And that's a pretty expensive proposition for something that simple. And so the idea was, when we designed the Traversa, is to make something that was accessible, that made business sense for the operators, but was also incredibly safe and comfortable for the person that's occupying that chair. That's how that whole thing came about.
And I just want to give our viewers just a quick peek at what it actually is. So you can see this image on the left side. This chair is a stretcher that turns into a wheelchair and back and forth. And so, Ed, like all those rides like that you're mentioning, 90% of them that don't need to be stretchers, I mean, they can all be done with this chair. And I want to emphasize this is game-changing, because typically stretcher trips need to be done by 2 people. You know, there's a driver and an attendant that goes with them. Using this chair by Broda, you only need 1 person, and you can now do stretcher trips. In addition to safety being increased for the passenger. Ed, You know, Ed, you had mentioned to me before there's like a hard ROI and soft ROI, and I'd love for you to just give the audience a sort of explanation of what you mean by that.
Sure, absolutely. In fact, when we're talking about a hard ROI, what we're looking at is the savings that you get from using half as many people during a trip. Instead of 2 attendants like you would with a gurney, you could have simply the driver utilizing 1 person on 1 chair to be able to move somebody. Number 2, the chair itself is about 1/3 of the cost of an actual gurney that's provided by a major manufacturer. So there you have a cost savings as well. Number 3, your vehicle requirement can be just a standard ADA accessible wheelchair van, you know, a long cut, shortcut, side entry, whatever, versus having to buy a much bigger vehicle that requires some special compatibility with the gurneys itself. So there's several instances of a hard ROI savings right there. What one of the providers told me about a soft ROI is the things that are less tangible. For example, a pull-through demand created by either case managers, discharge planners, administrators, because they're not getting complaints because the patients are safe and comfortable in the chair. It's easy to load, especially when you're able to get somebody off of a bed and put them, you know, from a stretcher back into a seated position. It also helps the NEMT provider distinguish themselves with a unique transportation proposition that kind of helps them break out of some of the contractual limitations of their reimbursement. So this is a great way to build a niche business if it doesn't already exist in your area by utilizing something like this. And more we're finding that not only is it being asked for by name, but in some cases it's probably going to come down to it's almost required that a provider uses some kind of WC19 crash tested wheelchair. So being able to be ahead of that curve is the soft ROI and making some money off that.
I don't doubt it at all because, you know, at Bambi, we have fleets all over the country. And I talk to them like, hey, you know, what are you thinking for the next 3 years, 5 years of the business? Like about your ROI, how you're going to improve. A number of our customers are telling me that, yeah, you know, there are things, okay, winning more contracts, getting more business. But I am starting to consistently hear, we are excited about this new Traversa chair by Broda. People use that word. We're excited about how that is going to be one of the biggest levers for improving the profitability of their business.
For those who may be concerned about a new product, you know, I am always that way. I don't want to be the first guy to go get the new phone. I don't want to be the first guy to go get the new TV because I'm like, let them work out the kinks, then I'll get the better version, right? But when we think about this chair itself, this chair really started in 2011. That model is the very first model, and it looks very quite similar to the one that we have now. But after feedback that we hear from NEMT customers like yours is what really brought this newer version or the second model of that version into play. And so even though we came in with some presuppositions as to how this can really help to grow business, I think that we've learned mountains of stuff in the year that we really rolled it out at the last NEMT until now. And we're still learning. I love to hear the stories and where it finds a spot and what the referral sources are hearing and how it is growing business. We just had some feedback this past week about a gentleman who, because of the Traversa, got 2 rides at $750 a piece just for that. Not a long distance trip, just a short distance trip at that. And this was in Indiana, I believe. And he was saying, do you realize how many other standard wheelchair trips I would have to give in order to make up for that $1,500 for those 2 trips? So that's just something that's just hot off the press within the last week. And we hear more and more stories. So I'm excited just from your users and anybody else to hear any stories that we can hear so that we can share that with everyone, because that really is a main focus of ours, is how can we help you grow your business with this product?
Yeah, totally. And you preempted my next question, which is like, what's the background of this chair? Because you guys have had similar products, and you know, this one was a long time in the making, and it's basically finally here.
This really generated from feedback from customers on our healthcare side. The entire WC19 qualification for a chair is something that's been around for quite a while. And it's not exclusive just to non-emergency medical transport. It's always been there for a chair manufacturer to have something, to have it tested so that it is safe for transport. So we were responding to our customers and say, hey, we need brackets for your chairs. That's really where it started. And then, so we did that. There's two types of testing. There's occupied and unoccupied. One deems it safe for the chair to travel in a vehicle without anyone in it, or you can have it tested occupied, which is what we chose to do. And then we started to see a lot of excitement with our previous version. And then we started to see a lot of excitement from the people who were providing the transports. Remember, we created this for a healthcare side of the business, but we started to see, hey, there's more to this than what we know. So really over that last, at least since 2011, what is that now, 13 years, over that time frame is where we've learned and just got some of that feedback to what we see now. But it's exciting to see. And I'm excited to see what we do in the future. We've already got some things up our sleeve.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, oh, yeah. Maybe we'll save that for another podcast.
It's a tease. It's a tease, Dave.
And I think what Dave is talking about is we're fortunate that we get to see some of the good work that's manifested every single day. And in fact, you know, I told Dave when we sold our very first Traversa chair, as we released it, I was asked to bring it over to a particular facility. They wanted to test it on one patient in particular that they were concerned about. And so we took it in. This gentleman was about 6'7" and basically maxed out the weight capacity on the chair. And so we were able to move him into the chair. We were able to take him out to the vehicle in which he'd get transported to the hospital, and then be able to take him back in pretty much with no real fuss other than his weight. And I noticed that the attendants who were taking care of this gentleman, they had tears in their eyes. And I asked them in particular, I said, so are you happy we were able to do this? And one of them said, you don't understand. This is the first time he's seen daylight in over 2 years. He hadn't even been outside of his room. And, you know, except for maybe some hygiene things and things like that. But he had not left the building. He hadn't been outside. They had no way to take him out. And all of a sudden, we gave him that mode of freedom to be able to go outside, get some fresh air, and attend his doctor's appointments, which, you know, there was a study that came out in Florida that showed having accessible transportation for patients in the Medicare Medicaid system, or Medicaid system in Florida, actually saved the state millions of dollars because people were able to make their appointments on a regular basis and stay healthier longer because they had the ability to transport. That's all we can do, is just provide, if it's safe and accessible. And in fact, talking with one of the organizations that we were with before, he said CMS and Health and Human Services is talking directly about accessible, safe, and reliable transportation. Because in the long run, it saves money for the entire healthcare system. We just happen to be able to do it this way.
Yeah, I mean, those numbers are huge, but it also comes with this very accessible and relatable story to anyone that, like, this guy hadn't been outside in 2 years.
Yeah.
And now, because of this product by Broda, he's literally able to go outside, which he was never able to do.
From a healthcare perspective, our healthcare side, we see these stories all the time. We have terms for that internally, and we talk about that constantly in our sales meetings of what are we seeing where we're improving lives, just because of something as simple as a chair. And everybody on our sales team could probably give you 25 stories apiece where we've seen that. The exciting thing is now we get to bring that aspect into a very customizable and movable chair into the NEMT industry, to where I think people will see the same thing, and the feedback that they'll get from their customers will be top notch. One of the benefits of the chair that we didn't really see coming, but we've had feedback on, which was interesting, is as soon as someone will roll a Traversa in, put them in a little bit of tilt, not even a full recline, we're just using a tilt mechanism in the chair, It's shortly into a trip, the patients are falling asleep or the customers are falling asleep, which the feedback we get from the drivers is, man, I love that chair because these people are asleep and I can just enjoy my trip. So it's pretty interesting. That's a whole side effect that no one thinks about, but it's something that we've definitely seen.
Amazing.
I know.
Well, it's a huge blessing. I mean, if you have somebody falling asleep and comfortable, that goes back to the soft ROI point that we made earlier. But even more so, I think most NEMT operators have transported folks that are compliance issues. They're uncomfortable, they're scared, they're trying to take off their seat belts, crawl out of a chair. The driver has to keep pulling over and resecuring them. If we can help eliminate that just because it's comfortable, never mind it's safe, but just because it's comfortable, that alone changes the entire perception of the ride.
Is there any good reason that any stretcher trip should be done without a chair by Broda?
It could be some back issues. There could be where somebody has to be fully flat. But in our research, which has been many years, it's 90+ that you don't need to lay flat. And that's really the purpose of a gurney, right? Is to lay flat. It's not anything more than that. And so it just has become the standard, right? It's like you need a gurney transport or you need a chair. There's never been another option. And so somebody who isn't compliant for a chair, they just say, well, they need a gurney, even if they don't really need to lay flat. How often did we hear people say, many times I've pulled up to a hospital, we have somebody who's being released from the hospital. They roll them out in a wheelchair. They'll stand up from the wheelchair. They'll walk over to the gurney and they'll lay down in the gurney, and immediately they'll prop the back up on the gurney and they'll wheel them into the vehicle. So what does that tell me? It says that person does not need a gurney. They just need something more than a standard wheelchair. So what we've done is we've just come up with something that's the in-between, and it's perfect for both. Do you have the option to lay it flat and transport if you need to? You absolutely do. But it's the wheelchair. It's still just a wheelchair.
Yeah. And like we were saying, these 90% of rides that don't have to be done by stretcher,
yeah,
that 90% can and should be done by this product.
Yeah, I would say it's 90+. It could be closer to 95. It's just very, very minimal, especially when we are non-emergency. When you're in a non-emergency world, my guess is that number is probably even higher. But from a non-emergency perspective, it's going to be very rare that you would need to transport someone flat. And my guess is most of our providers that are the NEMT providers would not be willing to take that patient anyway because of all the other ancillary needs that would need to be having, that would need the care of an EMT or whatever else needed. So it's almost a moot point.
I think they call that BLS certification, basic life support, where if you have to have a gurney, it probably means you also have to have other things like CPR capabilities, IV poles, medical staff in the vehicle with it. There's a lot of other things that are happening there. So as I told somebody yesterday, point blank, if you need a gurney, use a gurney. But most of the time you don't. And so that's where we fall in.
Yeah.
The need comes what I hear from NEMT providers is the need comes because the referral source asked for it. So what our team does and hungers to do is to go out and work with all NEMT providers to go to the referral sources and show them what this chair is and what it does. And we've done that, and it is 100%. We've not had one person say, I could never use that. It's 100% that those referral sources will say, absolutely, I would love to use that chair. Yeah. So that's one of the things we'd like to challenge people to bring Ed out, to bring myself out, to bring any of our sales team out. Let's go talk to your referral sources and show them what that is, because they're only ordering gurney just out of necessity. Is it's the only option besides a wheelchair. That's Absolutely. It.
Yeah.
Well,
I remember, Ed, you were telling me a story one time, and to prove the point that anyone can use this chair with any size passenger. I mean, you had the smallest person putting the largest passenger in this chair. I mean, if you care to share, Ed.
No, we've done that before. Like I said, even that gentleman that I referred to earlier, 6'7" and every bit of 400+ pounds, was being pushed by a female attendant from his room out to a vehicle and back. And that was, in fact, I think Dave was with me during one of those presentations, and that was like, okay, we can use it. Let's go. And they ordered 2 right there on the spot for their vehicles. And so that's the blessing of this type of device, is being able to move people that probably couldn't before. And, you know, from the perspective of, as an NEMT provider, being able to do those kinds of transports, to put it in perspective, one hospital transportation person once told me, it's easy to get people in the front door. It's really hard to get them out the back door, because if you're waiting for the gurney rides, you're waiting for essentially emergency services to finish doing what they're doing, and they may be called out on an emergency run while you were waiting for them to come take your discharge patient out. All of a sudden, the NEMT provider can cover this gap and literally take the overflow that emergency providers just don't have the time to do or the desire to do. So this is where it creates a new opportunity where one didn't exist before. So
yeah. And, you know, I was actually checking the data on Broda chairs last night in Bambi. So we have 100 fleets across the country using Bambi. And one of the modes of transport that we've built in, you know, there's wheelchair, there's ambulatory, there's stretcher. One of the modes is Broda. And I was seeing that over the past several months, as a proportion of our rides, the number of rides that are done by Broda has been increasing.
I like to hear that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's great information I didn't know about. So.
Sort of practical steps about actually getting this chair. You know, people watching this like, hey, I'm interested. I want to know more. How do I reach out, find out about the pricing, and actually get this chair for my business?
Call me, number one. No, I'm just kidding. Certainly, you can go to our website, which is brodaseating.com/Traversa. That'll take you straight to the Traversa page where you can see the device there. In fact, that little animated graphic that you showed earlier came from that page. So you can reach out to us via our website contact form. You can call us directly. All of our local representatives that we have all over the market are also able to demonstrate the chair in their local areas, or we can arrange a webinar to demonstrate the chair. But the easiest thing to do is, once you're ready, we can provide you a quote. We can actually even set you up with financing as well. We have wonderful financing partners like Mitsubishi HC Capital, which provides 6 months same as cash, and other very flexible terms, which is great for an NEMT operator to be able to cash flow their purchase before they even have to pay for it. We just have a whole lot of different options to do this, but the first step is just give us a call. We'll walk you through every one of the steps and make it able to show it to you live, webinar, whatever. We're happy to help.
Just to reiterate a little bit what Ed was saying, I think any operator, when we're talking about a 6 month same as cash option, is really the game changer that you're talking about. Simply because the ROI on this chair, even that worst case scenario, once you put it into practice and you're really playing with it and you're moving and you're getting your trips, the worst case scenario we've heard is maybe 2.5 months. We had one gentleman buy the chair because of the chair. He got a long distance trip that was an $8,500 trip. Immediately paid for the chair. So, but you can imagine even at $750 a trip, our ROI turns around pretty quick. So you can have that chair paid for multiple times over before that 6 month same as cash financing option even comes into play. So that's been really exciting, which is another one of our goals, right? How can we help your business as an NEMT? This is something that gives you something to operate with before you actually have to spend the capital up front.
I mean, it's a similar principle behind how people buy vehicles. You know, you talk with people like, hey, I want a vehicle that's flexible. Can it do, you know, not only ambulatory, but wheelchair, but also stretch, you know, like people want. And this chair by Broda, I mean, it enables you to now do stretcher when you couldn't do it before. You don't need to have attendants and all that. You just have your one person, you buy this chair, you can now do stretcher trips, or trips that are at least labeled as stretcher.
It's the small operators trying to get bigger that are using this to differentiate themselves from the local knuckleheads that are just taking broker business. This is a way for them to kind of break out of that model, get their own private contracts, and differentiate themselves. Yeah.
It seems like a no-brainer to me. I'm tooting the horn, but I've been in this industry long enough and talked with enough providers to be able to comfortably say, like, I really think this is a game changer for the industry. And anyone who's even thinking about getting into stretcher, they need to come check this out.
Well, I need to ask you, are you applying for a sales job? Because it's starting to make a lot of sense. You're, or at least a hype man, right? Like when Ed's speaking, we can have you kind of hyping him up in the background. I do appreciate those words, because what it does is it speaks to the hard work and the efforts that many people have put into this, both our own engineers and our customers alike. This has really been a group project from people all across the board. And that's what makes it exciting. I do also want to mention that we're pretty excited about a new agreement that we have with one of your past guests that was just on here, John Maselli, who we are big fans of him and his company with Model 1. It's another way to go ahead and get a Traversa chair. Model 1 is incorporating that into the builds of the new vehicles and doing financing with the chair involved, all in one package. So you can certainly reach out to us for more on that, or reach out to Model 1 and John Maselli for that information. But it's just another way to try to make it easy and seamless for the providers.
That's awesome. And yeah, you can also reach out to Bambi. Be happy to put you in touch with the good folks at Broda or at Model 1 about that as well.
It's such a great business. I think probably one of the funnest things also that Dave will attest to is that every day we learn from the providers how they've been implementing this wheelchair as well. In fact, I don't know why I just thought of this story. One of the providers that I know well, when we showed him the ability to go up and down, he's like, wait a minute. And he turns straight over to his marketing person. He says, from this moment forward, we do not turn away imaging customers anymore, because now they can bring a chair up to the level of an imaging table and be able to provide that service instead of a gurney. I didn't even know that was a thing, that imaging tables don't go down low enough to transfer somebody over. Now they can come up to the imaging table. That is a subset of everything that they do, and something we weren't even aware of. And so we actually love hearing from you and from the other NEMT providers. What else are you doing with the chair that you couldn't do before? Because we learn from that. That's where we're getting our base of experience as well. So
yeah, I think something that's funny is, for those who have been limited in the chair itself, like they're saying, okay, we're going to start off, we want to take this slow, we want one chair, give us one chair. And that chair will be out quite a bit, obviously. The referral sources are loving that, but yet still maybe because of financing options that weren't there in the past, or just the means, they've still just got one chair. I love the feedback that many are saying, okay, who gets the chair today? Whose turn is it to use this chair? So I'm going not from a patient perspective, but from an NEMT perspective. You've got drivers who are fighting over the chair because it's making their job easier. Like I said, patients and their customers are falling asleep in the chair. That makes the trip so much better. So then it's just up to us to say, hey, well, how can we get a little bit more creative so that we can get you some more chairs? And with more chairs, obviously, is coming more referrals. But that's just something that we don't foresee these little tidbits happen. That even in an NEMT, the drivers are saying, I want the Broda van today, and I want the Broda chair. Give me the Traversa. And so somebody else is just out, especially if they only have one.
Yeah. And I mean, one thing that may or may not be obvious, but I want to emphasize, is that nothing else like this exists out in the market. Nothing even comes close. And so I just see you guys so poised to just proliferate rapidly throughout this entire NEMT industry, like really quickly.
And all we ask is that you give us a call, have a conversation. We bring a chair out, we'll put it to the test. We have nothing to hide, as Ed likes to say. We've got nothing to hide. We just manufacture what we think is a really game-changing product in the industry, and we're excited about it. And we've got a window to go out and prove that to everyone, and that's all we ask. Just give us a chance to prove that.
Please feel free to reach out, because as we continue to proliferate out there in the industry, we're hearing such wonderful examples of how people were able to successfully incorporate this into their business in ways that we hadn't even thought of, and ways that didn't exist prior to this chair. You know, one of the first things that comes to mind is we had a customer tell us that a hospital is paying them, what, $250 an hour to loiter in the parking lot waiting for a discharge because they couldn't keep waiting for emergency services to do the discharge. You know, that's pretty important to know, that a provider will pay $250 to sit there in the parking lot and just wait. I mean, you're getting paid to wait. And I think that's a tremendous position to be in if you presented the product correctly and you're able to do things that other people couldn't do and be available sooner rather than later with something like this. We get that just from conversations. In fact, we have spoken with some of our customers that we actually have to temper their excitement. Like, man, do we need to, can we put them in front of somebody? Because they'll just keep going off in this tangent, and we love it and we learn from them. And it's just, it's wonderful to hear that kind of stuff, you know?
Yeah, I think the proof too is our customers are our best advocates. That's what you want. They're the ones that are creating content on LinkedIn and social media themselves. We have nothing to do with that content that they're creating. I'm thinking of one of our good friends and dealers up in Michigan, just creating a lot of really great content because he's seen it happen. He's using it. He's seen how it's changing his business, and he's taking it upon himself to show, hey, this is what you can do. But also, he's doing it for his referral sources. Don't get anything wrong. He's showing them and showing off, right? But no better advocate than your customers, and that's also been super exciting.
You make money by doing good for the world. Like, you are improving passengers' safety and making more money by doing so. It's like you guys are mentioning, like the NEMT businesses who get these chairs, they can now have new revenue streams and charge more for their existing trips because the hospitals want it, the passengers want it, they're willing to pay more for it, and everybody wins. I'm excited to see your guys' continued trajectory.
Safety regulations will come. I don't know when they'll come. I know there's a lot of advocates right now for pushing safety regulation from a federal level, but they will come. We like to tell the story and equivalent it between childcare seating and what we're doing in NEMT right now. Imagine a world where you didn't ride in a child seat anymore. Well, I grew up in that world. You know, I love the story where our first semblance of any kind of a safety in a vehicle was our mom throwing her arm out in front of us so that we wouldn't fly through the windshield, right? Not much safety there, but we all understand that. My mom still does that. My mom shouldn't be driving right now, but she still does it, right? So it's the same kind of thing. All of that and that time frame to get that safety regulations into place to where now all the childcare seating has rules. There's expiration dates on it. There's front forward face, rear facing, front forward facing. There's weight limits. All of that is there. We just haven't got there yet in this industry, but it will come. We've already just equipped the right chair for it right now. It's already there.
You get one of these chairs now, you're set for when the regulations do come in for safety.
We can be on the forefront of that and already start to implement that into our businesses from a safety standpoint and a pre-regulation regulated industry. But no doubt about it, it will happen. The more people that hear about some of the atrocities that we hear about in NEMT and how we're transporting people, the more they hear about, the more that gets a groundswell of support. There will be safety regulations. So that's another thing that we do is we like to say, hey, why don't we be ahead of a curve as a company? Now you're starting to set yourself apart from a selling standpoint of, hey, we know what's coming. We've already adapted and adopted these things into our business to be strong and to be the best that we can be before there's ever any kind of federal regulations. And that's been another great point. And so we see people jumping on board. Now, that would be one thing if we charge $20,000 for it, but we don't. It's $7,500 for the base chair, which is less than a used gurney.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Get ahead of that curve.
The problem is what we're inevitably doing at NEMT is we're taking a baby in the back of our car. We have all the correct things, and we're strapping it all to a cardboard box. Like, who would do that? But that's what we do. In the NEMT, well, I'm great. I have all my Q string straps. Great. But you're strapping it to a cardboard box. This thing is going to destroy itself at any given moment. I mean, who would put their baby in a cardboard box, even though you've got all the great straps and everything in a car? You're not going to do it. So why do we do it with people who many times cognitively and functionally are like a child? Why do we do it?
Yeah.
Because there is no law against it. That's why.
Yet.
Absolutely.
I'm just a fanboy of what you guys are doing.
Hey, and we likewise are fanboys of Bambi and have love. You know, Ed and I were just talking. We're like, is he just not the nicest guy you've ever met in your entire life? And we try to think if there can't be anybody else that could be any more pleasant and nicer than you. So, but it's been good to have that relationship. I love what you're doing for your customers. We just want to be a part of that and help you in any way that we can and help your customers as well. And run Bambi, run, as they say.
I was about to ask you.
You want to do the countdown?
Yeah. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Run,
Bambi, run.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.